And it started with us over 10 years ago because we took a group of pupils from within the school to the Somme battlefields, and we did that for 4 or 5 years in a row, where we would go over and we would look at what was known as the iron harvest in the fields. In February, when the tractors ploughed the ground up, this items and things, you know, artefacts of Great War, would be churned to the surface by the plough blade, and because it was all iron and rubbish they saw as debris on their field, they would just throw it to one side, and then people like us would come along. And an item of such as that is this German Gewehr rifle, which is completely unloaded. There's no rounds or anything, you know, bullets-wise in it or anything like that. It was clearly dropped at the time. It's got damage to it. It's you know, it's unstructured now as a weapon, and it's very much now an exhibit within what we have. We go through various stages of German. All of this cabinet here is actually German. We've got the German 1916 helmet, a German 1918 helmet, and a German 1916 helmet with a brow plate. These brow plates on here were really disliked by the Germans themselves, because as you can see, it's really big, really heavy, and if you had that on the front of your head, the weight on your neck muscles was increased. But the thing was, it was meant to be bulletproof in the sense that if you put your head above the parapet of the trench and you got struck in the head, then that would be something that would help protect you. But that's what those lugs are for, was to actually hold it, but they really didn't like it. They didn't like it. So they moved on. Yeah, please do. You can feel the how.
Wait, it's thick, so thick.
Yes, it is, yeah. And if I take the hat off of the stand, and if you like put your purse down, if you feel, you come around here and you just feel the weight of that.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, you can actually feel.
Oh, imagine.
Yeah, and this is an original German helmet.
Wow. Ooh.
Yeah, so
It's
it's really heavy. Yeah.
Yes.
They moved on in technology because at the start of the Great War, they had the Picasso helmet, which you can see on this mannequin here, which was the leather helmet with the spike on top. That was
not really much above the spike, not a lot of protection.
Well, it was not. It was a ceremonial hat anyway,
Yes.
and it was basically unknown. They didn't realise that bombardments by shells, airbursts with shrapnel shells coming down would actually, that would protect you. It didn't. So that's why you had 2 different types. You had that one, or you had that, and that was your 2 hats of the start of the war in 1914. It moved on from that, obviously, by 1915, 1960. The amount of head casualties that they were sustaining meant that they needed to have the helmets.
And these are iron?
They are steel.
Steel.
Yeah, they're pressed out of steel. This, again, is an original helmet. This particular one is known as an M1918, and it's an ear cutout, which you can see from this. People think that they were for radios or for telephones, but it wasn't that at all. These cutouts were because in a trench, the noise going on around you, you couldn't hear what orders were being shouted. So they, at the end of the war, and we know it finished in 1918, they didn't. They produced this helmet at the beginning of 1918 with the cutout for the trenches so that they could hear what was being said. But as you can see, it's quite a rusty relic, this one, and it was reconstituted because if you look at the signs on it now, that is Adolf Hitler, World War II. And because they were withdrawn from service, they were then put into storage. And then in 1939, at the outbreak of World War II, they brought them back out again and recommissioned them. But they didn't last. They were only out for a couple of years before the Germans made a new one. So that's that one's a particular one. That's a fireman's helmet of the same period. So that's a bit of the home front, if you like.
Indeed.
Yeah. Various bits and pieces through there, medals. You have the...
And some of these have been donated?
No, all of these are from a collection. We've got very little donations in the museum. Most of it is what we've collected as a school or as a private collection.
On the internet?
Some of it is, well, that's a fantastic tool now, the internet. Before, it would be auctions, it would be military fairs, that sort of thing. Even car boot sales has turned some of these things up. You know, I've got something down here I can show you that came from a boot sale about a month ago, and they're still turning up now. So all of this cabinet is German. And you can
they were much better provided for with their trenches than we were. weren't they?
It's difficult.
The trenches were better.
You see, the trouble with Germany was when they started in World War One, at the beginning of the Great War, the Germans had good equipment because they were prepared for it. But what they didn't do, they underestimated the fact that they were going to be fighting on various sides. They had the Italians in the south, they had the British and the French coming in from the west, and of course they had the Russians on the east. So they were very, very up against it. They were landlocked in a certain way. So as the war progressed, they felt the squeeze, if you like, and their equipment and their home front started to suffer from it.
Yeah.
We move along to a British section here. Majority of what's in here is British. We have sniper plates up here. These would have been on the top of the trench. The rifles would have been poked through the apertures on these, and you would then, you know, this is your British side of what they were shooting at, which was the heads of the Germans walking through the trenches, sometimes only 100 feet or so away. A rifle underneath here, this is a Mark IV Enfield. It's actually later than World War One, but it's the same period of, you know, it's the same type of rifle they would have used there.
Amazing how much of it is made of wood.
Yeah, but underneath all of that is metal.
Oh, right.
So it's just a casing in front of it. And that has got a number 52 sniper scope on that, or 53, beg your pardon, sniper scope on that. And then you have the bandolier here, which would hold around 100 rounds. Yeah, that would go across the shoulder. Underneath you have various hand weapons, including a 9mm
Would the ordinary
Luger.
soldier, infantryman, have a hand weapon as well as a rifle?
Not all of them, some would. If you was an NCO, a non-commissioned officer of like a sergeant or that sort of thing, you would probably have a hand weapon as well. And of course, lots of these things are being dropped in the rush of things, and people would pick them up and keep them on them.
Yeah.
So they weren't just souvenirs; they were actually used and moved on with. So you can see there's a Springfield sight from an American rifle there, which was obviously 1917 onwards. And this is trench debris, which we've picked up on our things. You know, we have a British water bottle here, which is full of what we call the rust and dust of the collection, and it's very much on. And to do with Warhorse, which is particularly interesting, we have various horseshoes of different sizes. Well, yeah, this would be like a Shire horse type, big horse that would have pulled the gun carriages and such like that. And then you would have had something similar to that, which would have been a cavalry horse. But as you can see from here, there's lots of different ones. We've had mule shoes and all sorts of things, really. So, but these are quite nasty. These were also designed for horses. This is to maim the horse. These would have been thrown across the battlefield, particularly in front of any cavalry charges, and any which way it landed. This one's obviously got a lot of spikes broken off, but any which way it landed, it would have had spikes up. And if that had sunk in the mud and a horse had put its hoof on it, then you would have had a lame horse.
No, I've never heard of that.
Yeah,
It's called what, a caltrop.
Caltrop, yeah, that's correct.
So similar to the way the barbed wire was used
for men, that would be for horses, yeah. It was obviously it would slow down and impede any advance. So, you know, we'll move along. We've got medals here from various parts of the Commonwealth, which is France, Italy, and Britain up in there.
These are
Fantastic, aren't they?
spent their lives on them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would this one have started out the same as that and got worn down, or is it a different sort of
No,
spade?
no, that's correct. They are different. This one here is a trench spade, and you can see this would have been used by a Pioneer Battalion. That's a flat-sided. That would have dug out the trench quite well. Whereas a spade, which is shaped more of a heart shape or a U shape, these would have been used to actually just every man would have probably had one of these at their disposal to use. Yeah, they could have quite well. But every man had a tool on them, and that was this one. This is called the entrenching tool. Now, if you was in a hurry, you got the pick on one end, and you have this, and the handle would have slid through this and out the other side. And I can show you a really good example of one of those in a minute.
So you're just using that to quickly dig yourself in somewhere.
Yeah. Anywhere under the surface of the ground probably was a good place to be. So, they very quickly dug in under the ground. We've got bits and pieces here. The crucifix is also French. That was a souvenir at 1918. And the actual woodwork of it is made from bits and pieces of the battlefield, so probably ammunition crates and things like that, and then they were sold to make a few pounds. Netley Hospital, at Netley we've got a bit of a tenuous link with those because the military hospital down there housed Wilfred Owen, who was a famous war poet, and Lady Mountchet, who was residents here at the time, she supplied them with their Christmas dinner the year they were there. So, you know, the turkeys and the puddings and things. Yeah, absolutely. So that's great. What you've got here on the bottom shelf, if we look at the bottom shelf, is the things that you would see in a trench, not necessarily the African noble carry. That's more of a African type tribal weapon, Zulu in fact. But that one actually came from Lieutenant Wiles, and that was part of the kit that we got from that particular man's uniform. And there's a few pictures of him around with the African shields and things like that, and that was something that he probably took as a souvenir and was carrying around. But it's a war club, it's a mace, and that brings you nicely into the other things you see here.
Yeah.
What you've got at the front here are the tools of hand-to-hand combat in the trench. And
is what you don't actually think of. You think of them in their trenches firing at each other.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
don't ever, well, you do obviously think.
well,
that they
have you heard of trench raids?
Yeah.
Right, well that's where either the
They run
British or
into each
they would go into,
Yeah.
but if you started shooting and firing in a 1 mile long trench, for instance, people down the other end are going to know they're under a threat
Yeah.
because they can hear the firing at the other end. So they would go in and they would either try and take part of a trench out, whether it was a machine gun emplacement or whatever it would be, or it was just to take prisoners to try and extract information.
Yeah.
And they would go in, and these are the things that they would do. You can see this particular, what looks like a hand grenade on the end of a wooden shaft is exactly that. What they've got is that's a French throw grenade or lemon grenade. And before they filled it with any of the explosives, they've actually used it with what looks like a hammer handle or something like that. And that's give it a heavy weight on the end in which to club somebody with. And then the British got a bit more industrious because you can see the club here, this dark wooden club.
Yeah.
That's actually got studs in it from the boots. So that would be their boot studs. So they've actually heavily loaded that back. And then these things, which looks like medieval mace, is made by the blacksmiths, because where you have horses, you have blacksmiths, and when blacksmiths aren't busy doing horseshoes and things, they're making things like this to hammer.
That is literally medieval, that thing.
It is, yeah. It is absolutely straight out of medieval.
In the 20th century was still
Yeah.
using those.
Yeah. That's a German one.
Right.
Slightly smaller, less cumbersome. This is also German, but I think they were looking back at their past as being
Space, of course.
heraldic. Yes, exactly. I would have thought that was a dreadful idea of doing that. Down here we have a British mace. Now that's very simple design. It's a star shape which has been made in a mould and poured from steel, probably lots of it found around. And the blacksmith would melt it down. But the handles are what's interesting. The handles are the halve handles which take the entrenching tool.
Ah, right.
So not only could they carry the entrenching tool around with them with
Yeah.
the handle in their kit,
Yeah.
when they wanted to go on a trench raid, they just pop one of those out and put their handle of their trenching tool on it, and then they go off and fight with that. So you didn't have multiple handles, you just carried the head around. And we were talking earlier back there about the car boot sale aspect of it.
Yeah.
Well, that bugle there, which is made in Aldershot
Oh, yeah.
and dated 1907, is actually a £5 bugle from a boot sale not very far from here about a month ago. So things are still coming up that we can buy and collect. Absolutely. These tins, which you see around here, are the 1914 Christmas tin that Queen Mary sent out to the troops because they thought it'd be over by Christmas, didn't they? And of course it wasn't. And they had tobacco, sweets and things like that. Nurses didn't get tobacco, for instance. They would normally get boiled sweets. And then there were different things for Indian troops and things like that because of the religious aspect of it and things. But you'd have pipe tobacco with a small clay pipe, or you could have the cigarettes and the tobacco. So, and then there was also writing implements. As you can see here, we've got pencils, which are made out of bullets, the bullet cases, and they've actually got pencils in them. So that they would be in the tin as well. And of course you'd have the King and Queen pictures, and you'd have a Christmas card that you could have wrote and sent off to the families. Both of these, as you can see, are still intact with their contents. These are Hampshire things, which you know about. So if you're, these are all Hampshire, every one of those. There's your tank corps. There's your yeomanry. Then you've got watches. Now the watches were developing because they started out prior to World War I as a cased hunter or half hunter watch, pocket watch, similar to this one here, which you can see here on this officer. So you would have had this. And what they did was, because these were cumbersome, they decided that they would go into the new wristwatch aspect of it. And because wristwatches were quite fragile in the day, they get broken very quickly, These protected guards or wristwatch guards were developed to go over the watch to stop shrapnel or actually knocking it on the side of the trenches. Yeah. You see the penny down here? That's actually got a German bullet stuck in it.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that's probably somebody's loose change in their pocket and got shot, and the penny probably done some sort of saviour on them. Over here, as you go past that, you've got photography, and this one here is a Kodak Vest pocket camera, but it cost a fortune. It was 30 shillings in 1914.
Yes.
So you know that was it, and it was manufactured between 1912 and 1914. But when you see these photographs, the little photographs with where it says on the bottom like the Somme,
Yes.
and it's actually on the photograph.
Yes.
It's done with a camera similar to this or this type of exact camera because it's got a stylus on it, and there's an autographic window you can open and you can write down when you've taken your picture where it was and then close it again. It didn't make any difference to the film.
No.
It didn't damage the content of it. But because film was coming back with a gruesome type of detail to the home front, the army quickly got onto this and decided to ban photography in the Western Front unless you were an official war photographer, because any of this could have either got into the German hands and shown you what sort of trench systems we were having, or it showed you, it showed people at home the atrocities that were happening. What you got there is a completely untouched one. Okay, there's some of the cotton reels are missing, some of the cotton, but the buttons are complete and they're sewn in. They're actually never been taken off. You have a little needle section in the middle, and then of course you've got your button stick at the top, and the idea of the button stick is the slot. You'd run it behind the buttons of your uniform. It could be on a cap like this. You'd run it behind it, so when you polished the brass, it didn't polish the hat. So that's what the button stick's for. We have an original stretcher, and we call that the Iron Harvest. This is a typical Iron Harvest item. This is an 18-pounder shell. Could have even been high explosive, but it wasn't. This one, looking at this one, I can tell from it that this one was a shrapnel shell. We have a thick liner here, and it's very thin at the top. And that's because it would burst open in that sense.
So in there would just be bits of metal and...
Well, what was in there was actually lead balls, like lead musket balls. And I can show you, if you just stay there, I'll bring this to you. This one here is the nose off of it, okay? And these are the balls, what you would have had filled in it, and they would have been in there hundreds inside that. The artilleryman would set this fuse like an alarm clock with a tool that sits in, and there's various gauge marks around it. They could set it, and the idea was it would be flung from the British aspect over to the German side, and before it had chance to land in the mud, it would explode in the air, and these would then rain down on the trenches from above. Hence the head injuries and the need for steel helmets, because that's what they would do. They would cause serious harm to you. We'll pop that back down there, and this one is this is a memento that somebody's made for the Royal Artillery. So it's something nice. Then we come along and we look here at the nursing side of things. You know, what you see here is a cabinet full of the frontline bits and pieces. Down here you've got a field officer's medical field kit, and that's got the tools of what he would do as an emergency first aid on the battlefield.
So that's going to the wounded.
Like a triage area, get them sorted, get them back to triage, and then go on. This area here would be more field hospital, and this is a sterilising unit that you would put your needles and all your bits and pieces in, because they were reusable. We didn't have syringes that you throw away. There's a syringe there, for instance. You can see the construction of it was not meant to be thrown away. These are needles that would go into it, and then they would go into the sterilizer. And because this one's a mobile one, you can see it has a burner that goes underneath it to heat up the water inside, and that would in turn, it's got a lid and everything else on it, which is over there. Shell dressings, bandages, medicine bottles, all the different things which I couldn't even guess what a lot of them does. Inside this tube here is a thermometer for taking temperatures with, and then you've got some medals which would have been dished out, and you've got these here. So, and that's a replica World War I. That would have been a field pack that they would have used, a field medics pack, and that would have had the bandages and things like that in it. And then what we have here are the nurses. You might have seen the Crimson Fields television programme. These are the nurses off it, and Susanna Atkinson, who's the lady who made these uniforms from Tyne and Wear, she's actually a wardrobe mistress for all sorts of things, for museums, for plays, for television, everything. And she's made these faithfully to the original pattern with the right fabric, even the cotton weight and everything on them is right. So they're fantastic. So we have a VAD nurse there, which is volunteer aid. Then you have the, this is a sister from the Queen Alexander's, but she is a volunteer reservist, hence this colour. If she was a full nurse, the red would have been complete, not the grey. And what we have here is a soldier in his hospital blues. Now these would have been in Netley Hospital or in any other military hospital, and it was a clothing uniform made of cotton. As you can see, it's wore the red tie, the shirt. So this was to give them some sort of identity. You can see from the cards here, this is sat there with his hospital blues on. We have an original hospital wheelchair, which we managed to get. This has come from a naval museum originally. This came from a dockyard. So, but it's absolutely spot on, that is. Yeah. This is the nasty side of hand to hand again. Yeah, and we've got various items, you know.
Would every soldier have had a dagger then?
They definitely had a bayonet, and the bayonets on the British side were 18 inches long. You know, but then when you see things like this, that would have been used to take into hand-to-hand combat within a trench system. This is an original item, it's got all the marks on it. Most likely German, we haven't identified the actual part of it, but with the end of it, the bar on it, and the markings, they all look continental German most likely. So, and it's got the big slot in it for the blood groove. So, the Americans probably came straight out of Chicago with their type of implement, because not only did they have the 1918 knife, but they also had that fitted with a knuckle duster, and just for good measure on the end, that's for hitting on the head with. So, yeah, that would have been a nasty thing. But we don't think about the hand-to-hand aspect of it.
No, we don't at all.
Yeah, and this wasn't just restricted into the trench systems. This would be the shell holes in no man's land, where you'd have a German jump in it to hide out the way, and the British man's already in it. And they'd end up fighting hand-to-hand. And a lot of the time, this is the sort of things they did. Bayonets, various ones, lots of German again in there. The German soldier here, with all of his webbing. But this is a German uniform from the Bavarian regiment. We can tell it's Bavarian from the red stripe. So it's quite a... We've got them on there.
And they would have had a shirt under that as well?
Yeah, shirt underneath it. It'd be a woolly shirt though, with a detachable collar. In a lot of cases.
Just wash the collar.
Yeah, indeed.
Times.
Yeah. And you can see the early ones had the puttees that you were talking about with boots and laces. This is a German stick grenade, which is a replica. Over here we've got a British officer from the West Yorkshire Regiment, and he's complete from the ground up in the original kit. The trousers we know from Lieutenant Lyles, from the Hampshire Regiment. Okay, the boots we know they're original. They've got the name inside them of the person that owned them. And then we go up through the kit. This is a 1915 Sam Brown. That's dated as well. We've got the manufacturer's marks on the side. He has ammunition pouch here for carrying the rounds or the bullets for his revolver. He has his trench whistle, the all-important trench whistle, with a very unique sound, which is the sound of let's go over the top. They used to say over the top or hop in the bags. He would have his watch, and oddly enough, this one just happened to have stopped. It worked perfectly well, and it stopped at 7:25, which is about the time that they went over the top. Yeah, and that's a West Yorkshire Regiment. It's original helmet, original tie, silk tie. Then we've got different grenades. Americans called them grenades. Our ones are called Mills bombs.
Yes. I've often wondered what a Mills bomb actually was.
Well, Mills bomb is the British number 5 grenade. Like I say, the grenade aspect of it is what we know it as now. That one there that's a number 5, and it shows you the internal components. The red area, cutaway area there, would have contained the explosive. Then you have the plunger goes down to the fuse, which would give you 5.5 or 7 seconds, depending on which one it is, to throw it away. This one here is a suffocating gas grenade, model 1916. That one is French, and that would have exploded in a trench and then filled it with gas. As soon as it exploded, the gas content of that would have mixed with the air around it and then formed a deadly poison. In this case, it wasn't deadly because this one was tear gas, so we know that one for a fact. Then we have our faux grenade there with its fuse in, and we've seen that earlier on the end of a stick for a club.
That's right, yeah.
So that's what that. And something really rare is this 1915 Bertrand. Looks like a football. It would have contained, it hasn't got it in there now, but it had a glass ampule in there full of gas. And it was a concentrated gas that when it hit the ground, it would have got a chlorine aspect of it, and that would have got in your lungs and made things really bad.
My granddad on my father's side was gas.
But most of the round grenades were designed after balls, so that was easy to throw. Most people threw a ball.
Hand thrown?
Yes, absolutely, yeah. The ones with the sticks on the bottom, or with the rods, they're actually grenades that are fired from a rifle, an adapted rifle. They would have been fired out of that. And then this side of it here, we've got the German grenade, which we call the mashed potato grenade, or the potato masher.
Yes.
That's a genuine deactivated one. When you look at the one over there, that's a slightly different one. You would have undone the star piece at the bottom, and then a little cord would have come out with a ceramic ring on it, which you pull, and that sets the fuse off. And then you have what on the handle to tell you how long you've got before it explodes. Normally 5.5 seconds. No.
Don't want to be dropping it down by your
Definitely
feet.
not. These are early ones. These are Kugel grenades. These are ball grenades. Again, they're based on the fact that if you can throw a ball as a child, you can throw a hand grenade. So they made them like this. They're fragmenting grenades, so they've got those bits that would break off like a bar of chocolate. If you broke a bar of chocolate up, you can see how it would work. This one's actually in its transit case still as well, so that would have been hanging around a soldier's belt. And then when he wanted it, he would just flick off the leather strap, and then the grenade would be ready to go. These discus grenades were exactly that. They were designed on the athletes of throwing discus. And, but they had a centrifugal fuse in them, which when you pulled it back to throw it, armed it, but a lot of the time it would go off in your hand before you had a chance to let go of it. So they really got rid of that. 1915 to 1915, over with. This is interesting.
You didn't dig this up.
This is one of our friends that we have that look out for special items. Now this was on our shopping list for a long time, and this is a Livens mortar. It's a gas mortar, it being one of a battery of many. As you can see from the photograph there's one there behind Captain Livens. Okay, and this here is that. This is in the exploded state, and that would have gone down there and been found out, and that is full of gas.
Good.
It is a gas mortar. Now Livens, who designed this,
This is him.
that designed it, he was a bit of a pessimist. He was a bit of a pacifist, and he didn't get into the whole war aspect of it. He had more of a background job at the original side of it. But his fiancée was on the Lusitania, and it got sunk, and then his whole aspect of what he was doing changed. He obviously we didn't have modern phone systems. We didn't have ways of getting messages, and it was more than 2 weeks before he found out that she was alive and in Ireland. So he then went on to, we're going to end the war as quick as we can. And things like this, and the Livens flamethrower, which is another massive thing that he made, were these type of things. He was the brainchild behind all this.
What sort of gas would have been in that, do we know?
Yes, we do know what was in that. Phosgene gas was mainly the one. Just checking on that one. See, yeah, it's phosgene gas. And this one would have fired it an awful long way. You could get 1,000 metres, 1,500 metres out. It's a mile from this. But when you consider they didn't just fire one, this might have been one of 6. And this is an exploded iron harvest. You can see there's the tube. It's hard to believe now that actually would fit inside there, because they were designed to break open like this to let the gas content out as quickly as you could. But obviously, it's one of those weapons that is dependent on which way the wind's blowing. And if the wind changed after you fired it, then you'd get it all back yourself.
What a find.
Yeah. Some great integral, Nick. There's everything about it. We have the original base plate behind it as well. This wouldn't have sat on the surface like this. all you would have seen of it is that
Okay.
much.
Yeah.
It would have been buried in the ground.
Where's the actual
Detonate.
mechanism that
It would go in
propels?
first.
Oh, I see.
So a bit like a naval gun, you put
Yes.
down the charge first,
Yeah.
then you put down a wad,
Yeah.
then you sit the shell on top of that. The wires came out of this, and you know
Okay,
the old,
wires come out
yeah, you know the old plunger box.
Okay,
They would have
yes.
used one of those
I
to
see.
detonate all of them at once.
Right.
So you'd have had probably 8, 10, whatever. You could have fired them all. And in the background, you can see how many shells they've got stacked up on that picture, and actually shows you the contents of what went in it.
Yes.
So depending on how far you want to launch the missile, is how big a charge went in
Oh
it.
yeah, there's the wires.
Yeah, and they come out and they go to a detonator box.
Yes.
Another thing people don't realise is on the battlefront, there were metal dumps
No.
around the troops. So if you pick something up, there'd be signposts saying, don't walk past that steel helmet or something, it can be recycled. So you pick up a helmet off the battlefield, regardless of whose side it was,
Yes.
throw it into the pile, and then it would go back to be melted down for reuse.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a famous poster actually, it says that, don't walk past it, carry it back. So that's these different things. This is a real Lewis gun magazine,
All right.
and it has the Lewis 303 rounds in it, all of which are deactivated, they're all properly checked. But this one's all dated, it's 303, it's got the army stamp on it. So we've basically got an item here which can work in the sense of school children can pick it up, they can actually handle it, feel the weight of it. This one's an all metal construction as well, and to add a little bit of flame to it, we have to put a sound system in it as well.
When did the Lewis gun come in?
Well, this actually was an American invention that the British turned down before the war.
The
Before,
Lewis gun
yeah,
was?
yeah,
Right.
they turned it down and said it was never going to come in.
I was never too sure which they would have used, whether it was the Vickers or the Lewis. Cause
Both.
The Lewis, they would have
Both,
had
absolutely both.
Mm.
The Vickers was a heavy machine gun,
Yes.
and it took a team of
Team,
3 at
yes.
least to work it.
Yes.
This is a team of 1 or 2
Right.
because you can transport this. This actually has been given a butt on it here with a pistol grip
So that one
because
person
you can
can-
fire it from the
Yeah.
shoulder. You've got the bipod on the
Yeah.
front to fire it from a trench system. So it's very universal. It's very easy to to move around, and it was cheap to make. More so cheap to make. Well, this would have been used in a sustained fire role. It traverses left and right as far as you wanted to move it.
Yeah.
And it was on its tripod. Now, one person would carry that because it's so heavy. Another person carried a gun because it's so, and then you have ammunition. Then you have somebody for the water. Now, this is a water container here. So this is actually, that's right. It follows up this hose and it goes into this jacket, which is a water jacket. And the water jacket on the Vickers gun is what kept the barrel because it's not changeable.
No.
So that couldn't afford to stop.
No.
So to keep that thing firing continuously, the water inside it would cool down the barrel. It would then go out as steam through the tube into this condenser.
So they have to be careful of that as well. They wouldn't
Oh.
even get near the steam.
No, and the jacket would be hot. Some of them would have canvas bags around them or the sackcloth be wrapped around them to stop you burning yourself on it. The belt is a webbing belt, and that would have been fed with 250 303 rounds, and then you would have them changed every few minutes.
How long would that last when you were firing one round?
If you kept it going, you keep the trigger in. You can either give it bursts of 3 seconds, which fired off 5 to 7 rounds,
Yeah.
or you could you could just keep the trigger pressed in at the back, and that would keep firing until it run out.
Right. And that
It
would
would
be
just-
a matter of minutes.
Seconds.
Seconds.
Yeah, it wouldn't take long to do 250 rounds. You could probably do that in under a minute. This is a 2-gallon petrol can, but they were all over. So they used this for the water condensing. So as the water would evaporate down the tube, it would go in here, and then the steam would turn back to water,
right.
and then you just get the
Reuse.
water, open up the top here, and then fill it back up with a funnel. And then on the last table we have here are the heavy ordnance. But you know, the sounds that we have, such as the trench whistle, which we heard earlier, and the gas rattle,
Yeah.
you know,
Be loud.
they are exactly that. So, to get your attention. And they were noises that you wouldn't hear. They're not bangs or clashes or ringing of bells.
No.
They were things you don't hear. They're
Yeah.
extraordinary.
This was the first sort of mask. gas mask.
Yeah, it's a Phosgene hood.
Yeah.
This is a replica one, obviously.
Yeah.
We don't keep gas masks here. There are one or two later versions of the things which we use as a demo for people to handle but not wear, because early ones were filled with asbestos, and of course we now know asbestos isn't good for you. So
they may not be breathing in the gas, but they were breathing in the asbestos.
yeah, but they didn't know that, did they? So you know, what's worse, the asbestos at the time or the gas?
True.
This is a Phosgene hood. It's got a thing in the inside you'd have kept in your mouth, and you would have exhaled out through that. You wouldn't breathe in through it. You'd breathe through your nose and out through your mouth. So to clear it out.
And you were trying to do that when you were trying to operate that?
Yeah, and you've
else?
probably seen the photographs of that being used with these people wearing these,
yes.
but they steamed up inside. So they had to put a chemical on them or a cream on them to stop them doing it. A bit like a diver's mask, I suppose, but I wouldn't want to wear it. And of course, how did it work? You tucked it inside your collar. But if you had skin from your cuff to your wrists, for instance, that was exposed to the air and that was attacked by the gas, you'd have to use gas ointment. And you'd have to use it really quickly to get onto your exposed skin. And what you do is take one of these tubes, and these are all the real ones, unused, and you would break the top off of this lead tube, which again is no good to you, and then you would put the gas cream on you and rub it in liberally, a bit like a suntan cream. This is the fence post from Highwood. It's got German barbed wire still on it, but what makes this one particularly interesting is the fact that here you have machine gun bullet 1, 2, 3 going up the post.
Oh, yes.
And you can just see here the hole where the bullet would have gone through.
That.
And then you've got what looks like the backs of the bullets still stuck in them.
Definitely one in there.
Yeah.
My goodness.
And this is German barbed wire, we know, because of the closeness of the barbs on it. See how close they are? Yeah, lots to. Because we've got a roll down there, British barbed wire, which came back from Sayre.
Oh.
And you can see the gaps between the barbs on that brushes are really long. There's about 3-4 inches between them. And this one, you're talking there's 2 every couple of inches on it.
Yes.
And then we got our Tommy. So he's dressed in the Tyneside Irish uniform, complete with his gas mask, which is a replica because we're not allowed to have a real one. Well, certainly not on the open, it would have to be under a glass cabinet, but he's got everything about him. We were talking, you said, did every soldier have a knife earlier? Well, this is an 18-inch bayonet, and that was regular issue 1908 onwards. So they'd all had those. And when you've got your Lee Enfield rifle here, which was a standard issue, this is a standard one, that would have clipped onto here, like that. And then you've got yourself a very long weapon, but even so, if your German is stood on the other end of that, it's far too close as far as I'm concerned.
May I feel